James had always thought he had the perfect life. He was 35, successful, and married to Lily, his college sweetheart. They had been together for 8 years, and everything seemed right. James worked as a lawyer, and Lily stayed at home, taking care of their beautiful house in the suburbs. They had a quiet, comfortable life. Lily had always been charming and loving. She had once dreamed of becoming an artist, but decided to support James and focus on their family instead. James admired her for this sacrifice and thought it was what made their marriage strong. But over the past year, things had begun to change. Lily seemed distant. She wasn't as affectionate as before. James noticed that she spent more time alone in her art studio or went out with her friends on weekends. He thought it was just a phase, something that every long-term relationship goes through. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. But he trusted Lily. After all, they had built a life together, and James believed that their love would always be strong. He never imagined that his world was about to fall apart. It all started when Lily told James she needed space. She said their marriage had become too heavy, and she needed time to focus on herself. James was shocked and confused. They had always been close, so the idea that something was wrong was hard to believe. But wanting to make things work, James agreed. He thought maybe it would help them find a way to get closer again. At first, things were okay. Lily spent more time in her art studio, and she went out with friends more often. But James started noticing things that felt off. She was always on her phone, and when James asked her about it, she was quick to hide it. Lily became more protective of her social media accounts and started acting strangely around him. He tried not to think too much of it, but something didn't sit right. Then, one night, after a long day at work, James came home to find Lily's phone on the kitchen counter. Without thinking, he picked it up. A message from an unknown number caught his eye. It was a flirtatious text, something that made his stomach drop. It wasn't just a friendly message. It was intimate, suggesting a deeper connection. James' heart raced. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He confronted Lily immediately, demanding to know who was texting her. Lily tried to hide her surprise, but eventually she admitted the truth. She had been seeing someone else for a few months. At first, she tried to downplay it. "It's not what you think," she said. "We just have some things in common. It's nothing serious." But when James pushed her for more details, the truth finally came out. Lily had been having an affair with a man named Michael, someone she had met at an art gallery. He was older than James, and Lily said they connected over their shared love for art and creativity. James was crushed. How could Lily, the woman he loved, do this to him? But she continued, explaining that their relationship had become strained. She said she hadn't felt seen or appreciated by him in a long time. She felt alone, and that's why she sought attention from someone else. She told James it wasn't intentional at first. It just happened. The betrayal hurt more than James could ever imagine. But it didn't end there. Lily revealed the most painful part of all. She was pregnant. And the child wasn't James. It was Michael's. James felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. Not only had Lily cheated, but now she was going to have another man's child. The man she barely knew. The man who had taken her away from him. He didn't know what to feel. Anger, sadness, or confusion. As the reality of what was happening sank in, Lily seemed strangely calm. She wasn't apologetic. She wasn't trying to fix things. She was already planning a future with Michael. It was clear to James that she had emotionally checked out of their marriage a long time ago. James' mind raced. How could the woman he had shared so many memories would be capable of such betrayal? But despite the pain, he knew he had to accept it. The life they had built together was falling apart, and there was no going back. James was numbing the days that followed the confession. It felt like his world had shattered into a million pieces. He moved through the motions, going to work, eating, sleeping, but none of it felt real. The woman he loved, the woman he had built his life with, was carrying another man's child. The idea was almost too much to bear. Lily, on the other hand, seemed distant and strangely calm. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging for forgiveness. Instead, she seemed resigned to her choice, like she had already moved on. She spent more time talking about Michael about the baby, and what they would do together as a family. She no longer cared about the life she had shared with James. It was as if she had already turned the page. Every time James tried to talk to her about their marriage, she would say that she couldn't be with him anymore. She said she needed to follow her heart, and her heart was with Michael. James couldn't understand it. How could she move on so easily, so quickly, after everything they had been through? He had given her his heart, his trust, and this was how she repaid him. The worst part was the way she casually mentioned the pregnancy. "I'm happy, James," she would say, as if it didn't matter that her happiness was built on the destruction of their marriage. The thought of her with Michael, raising a child together, made James sick to his stomach. But there was nothing he could do. She had made her choice, and it wasn't him. One evening, after a long, silent dinner, James couldn't take it anymore. He stood up, his hands shaking with anger and hurt. "How could you do this to me, Lily? After everything? You're having his baby, and you don't even care about the life we built." Lily looked at him, her expression cold. "I do care, James, but I can't stay in a marriage that doesn't make me happy anymore. I tried, but it didn't work. I'm not the same person I was when we first got married. I'm different now, and I need to live for myself." James' heart broke as she spoke. It was like a slap in the face. He had always thought they could work through their problems, that love would be enough to overcome anything. But Lily wasn't the same woman he had fallen in love with. She had changed, and James was left holding on to a ghost of the past. Days passed, and James became more and more withdrawn. He stayed in their house, even though it felt like a prison. He spent long hours at work, trying to escape the reality of what was happening at home. But every time he came back, the emptiness in their house reminded him that Lily was no longer his wife. She was someone else's. James started to see how much she had truly checked out of their marriage. She no longer wore her wedding ring, and she started making plans with Michael as if James didn't exist. She would leave for days, telling him she was going to see her friends or attend art exhibitions. It was clear she wasn't coming back. One day, when James returned from work, he found her packing her things. She was leaving. She had found an apartment where she and Michael could start their life together. There was no fight, no argument. She simply told James that it was time for her to go, that it was over. James wanted to scream, to beg her to stay, but he knew it wouldn't change anything. Lily had made up her mind long ago. Her decision was final. "Are you really just going to walk away from everything we had?" James asked, his voice breaking. Lily didn't look back as she finished packing her things. "I have to do what's best for me, James. I'm sorry, but I'm done." As she walked out the door, James felt something inside him snap. He had never felt so helpless, so alone. The woman he had trusted, the woman he had loved, was gone. And worse, she didn't seem to care. For weeks after Lily left, James wandered through the emptiness of their home. He couldn't bring himself to pack up her things or move on. Every corner of the house reminded him of the life they once shared. It was hard to accept that the love he had built his world around was now gone. It was during this dark time that James began to ask himself difficult questions. What had he done wrong? How had he missed the signs? But deep down, he knew the truth. He hadn't done anything wrong. Lily had chosen to betray him, and she had done it with no remorse. She had chosen another man, and there was nothing James could do to change that. The pain was overwhelming, but James eventually came to a decision. He had to let go. He had to let go of Lily, of the life they had, and of the dreams they had shared, as hard as it was. He couldn't keep holding on to someone who had already moved on from him. Months passed, and the pain of Lily's betrayal still haunted James, but something in him began to change. At first, he couldn't escape the sadness. Every corner of their house, every place they had been together, reminded him of the life he had lost. He was angry, hurt, and confused. But deep down, he knew that sitting in that pain forever wasn't going to help him. He had to take control of his life again. The first step came when he decided to leave the house. He couldn't stand living in the space that had once felt like home. He moved into a small apartment downtown, a place far away from the memories of his old life. The apartment was nothing special, but it gave him the space he needed to heal. It was his own, and for the first time in months, he started to feel like he had a chance at rebuilding. James threw himself into his work. He had always been a successful lawyer, but his heart had never been fully in it. Now he worked long hours, focusing on his cases with new intensity. His colleagues noticed a change in him. He was sharp, driven, and more confident than he had been in years. It felt good to be productive again, to have something to focus on other than his broken heart. He also started to take care of himself. At first, it felt like an impossible task. How could he focus on himself when everything around him felt like a mess? But one day, he looked in the mirror and realized he had let himself go. He wasn't the man he used to be. He had gained weight, was constantly tired, and looked worn out. So he signed up for the gym. The first few days were hard. His body wasn't used to the exercise, but slowly he started to feel stronger. His confidence began to return, piece by piece. As James focused on rebuilding himself, he started to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: control. He wasn't going to let Lily's betrayal define him. He was taking back his life, and it felt good, but there was still something missing. He knew he couldn't truly move on until he had confronted Lily. He needed to face her one last time, not for closure, but for himself. He needed to see her, to realize that she was no longer the center of his world. One evening, James ran into Lily by accident. He was walking out a cafe when he saw her walking with Michael, her hand resting on his arm. She was glowing, her face full of happiness, while Michael looked like the man she had always dreamed of. James stopped in his tracks, heart pounding. For a moment, he felt like his world had collapsed again, but then something strange happened. Instead of feeling hurt or angry, he felt nothing. Lily looked up and saw him. Her face went pale, and she immediately pulled her hand away from Michael. James didn't let her finish. "I'm fine, Lily," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm doing okay. I've moved on." Lily's eyes filled with guilt, but James didn't feel the need to explain anything further. He didn't owe her anything. "You have a good life with Michael," he continued. "I hope it works out for you. But I'm not part of it anymore." Lily didn't know how to respond. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but James had already turned away. He didn't need her approval. He didn't need her excuses. He had taken back control of his life, and that was all that mattered. As James walked away, he realized that this was the moment he had been waiting for. The moment when he no longer cared about the past, no longer cared about revenge, or the anger that had burned in him for so long. He had let it all go. In that moment, he truly understood what it meant to heal. Revenge wasn't about getting back at Lily. It was about getting back to himself. In the weeks that followed, James continued to focus on his personal growth. He went on a solo trip to the mountains, something he had always wanted to do but never had the time for. He spent time reading, reflecting, and reconnecting with the things that made him happy. He found peace in nature and rediscovered his love for hiking. For the first time in a long time, he felt at ease. Around the same time, James began dating again. He wasn't rushing into anything serious, but he enjoyed meeting new people. One woman, Sophie, stood out to him. She was smart, kind, and independent. Unlike Lily, Sophie wasn't trying to change him. She was just happy being herself, and she respected James for who he was. Their connection grew over time, and soon they were spending more and more time together. James found himself looking forward to their conversations, to the way she made him laugh, to the way she made him feel alive again. Sophie wasn't Lily, and James didn't want her to be. He had learned that he needed someone who would love him for who he was, without the need for approval or validation. He had to trust himself first. One night, as they sat on the balcony of his new apartment, sipping wine and watching the sunset, James realized how far he'd come. He wasn't the same man he was when Lily left him. He had rebuilt himself from the ground up. He had reclaimed his life, his peace, and his happiness. "I never thought I'd get here," James said, looking at Sophie. "Get to where?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "To a place where I feel like myself again," James replied, smiling, "like I'm finally in control of my own life." Sophie smiled back, taking his hand. "You are," she said softly, "and I'm glad you found your way." As they sat together, Watching the sunset, James felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Revenge wasn't about destroying Lily's life. It was about reclaiming his own. And now, for the first time in a long time, James was truly free. James had come a long way from the broken man who had once been consumed by anger and betrayal. Looking back, it was hard to believe how much his life had changed in just a few months. The pain of Lily's affair and betrayal he had felt had been a deep wound, but it no longer defined him. He had reclaimed his life, piece by piece. He had spent so much time feeling lost, questioning what went wrong, and wondering if he would ever be whole again. But now, as he sat on his balcony with Sophie, watching the world go by, he realized that he was stronger than he had ever been. He wasn't the same man who had stood in front of Lily, begging her to stay. He wasn't the man who had let her mistakes destroy him. He had grown from the experience, and he had learned to love himself again. The process hadn't been easy. It had taken time, effort, and a lot of self-reflection. But James had found a sense of peace that he never thought possible. He had focused on his career, worked on his fitness, and, most importantly, he had allowed himself to heal. He no longer needed Lily's approval or validation. He no longer felt that empty space in his heart that had once been filled with her. It was his heart now, and it was just to fill with love, trust, and happiness. And then there was Sophie. She was a reminder of how far he had come. Sophie wasn't a replacement for Lily, nor did James want her to be. She was simply someone who had shown him what it felt like to love again, without fear or baggage. With Sophie, James felt he could be himself, vulnerable, happy, and hopeful for the future. In the end, James realized that true revenge wasn't about hurting the person who betrayed you. It was about taking control of your own life, finding happiness again, and learning to live for yourself. He had reclaimed his peace, his happiness, and his freedom, and that, he realized, was the ultimate victory.